In a distant land called Uz, there lived a man named Job. He was known as a man of complete integrity, honest, upright, and deeply devoted to God. Job feared God and turned away from evil in all its forms. His reputation spread far and wide, and he was regarded as one of the greatest men in the East. Job was not only righteous, but also extremely wealthy. He owned vast flocks of sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys. His household was large, filled with many servants, and his influence was significant. More importantly, Job was blessed with a loving family, 7 sons and 3 daughters. His children often gathered together to feast and celebrate, enjoying one another's company. Yet, Job remained spiritually vigilant. After each gathering, he would rise early in the morning to offer sacrifices to God on behalf of his children. He would say to himself that perhaps his children had sinned or cursed God in their hearts. This was his regular practice, showing both his deep love for his family and his reverence for God. The heavenly scene one day, a remarkable event took place in the heavenly realm. The sons of God came to present themselves before God, and among them was Satan. God spoke to Satan and asked where he had come from. Satan replied that he had been roaming the earth, going back and forth upon it. Then God pointed out Job, describing him as a blameless and upright man, one who feared God and shunned evil. But Satan challenged this, suggesting that Job's faithfulness was not genuine. He argued that Job only served God because he had been blessed and protected. According to Satan, if Job's blessings were removed, he would surely curse God. God allowed Satan to test Job, but with a restriction. He could take away Job's possessions, but he was not allowed to harm Job himself. The first wave of suffering what followed was a series of devastating events, all occurring in rapid succession. A messenger came to Job and reported that the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were feeding nearby when raiders attacked, stealing the animals and killing the servants. While that messenger was still speaking, another arrived with news that fire had fallen from the sky, burning up the sheep and the servants. Before Job could even process this, a third messenger came, saying that the Chaldeans had formed raiding parties, seized the camels, and killed more servants. And then came the most heartbreaking news of all. A fourth messenger arrived and told Job that his sons and daughters were feasting in their eldest brother's house when a great wind struck the building. The house collapsed and all his children were killed. In one single day, Job lost his wealth, his servants, and all 10 of his children. Overwhelmed with grief, Job tore his robe and shaved his head, a sign of deep mourning. He fell to the ground, but instead of cursing God, he worshipped. He declared, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Despite his immense loss, Job did not sin or blame God. The second test, physical affliction once again. Satan appeared before God. God pointed out that Job still maintained his integrity, even after losing everything. But Satan argued that if Job's health were taken, he would surely curse God. God permitted Satan to afflict Job's body, but he was not allowed to take his life. Soon, Job was struck with painful sores all over his body, from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. The pain was unbearable. He sat among ashes, scraping his sores with a piece of broken pottery, trying to find some relief. Seeing his suffering, Job's wife spoke out in despair. She urged him to turn to God and die, unable to understand why he would continue holding on to his faith. But Job responded with remarkable strength. "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Even in his agony, Job refused to sin against God. The arrival of 3 of Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, heard about his suffering and came to comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They wept aloud, tore their robes, and sprinkled dust on their heads in sorrow. They sat with Job on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights. During this time, no one spoke a word because they saw how great his suffering was. Finally, Job broke the silence. He spoke of his deep anguish and cursed the day he was born. He did not curse God, but he expressed his pain, wishing he had never existed to experience such suffering. The long debate after Job spoke, his friends began to respond. One by one, they argued that suffering is a result of sin. They believed that God is just and would not allow such suffering unless Job had done something wrong. Eliphaz suggested that Job should seek God and admit his wrongdoing. Bildad insisted that God does not pervert justice, and that Job's children must have sinned to deserve their fate. Zophar was even harsher, urging Job to repent so that his fortunes might be restored. But Job maintained his innocence. He knew he had not committed any great sin that would justify such suffering. He struggled to understand why God would allow this to happen to him. He questioned, he lamented, and he longed for an explanation. The dialogue continued back and forth for many chapters. Job defended himself, while his friends continued to accuse him. The discussions grew more intense, revealing the limitations of human understanding when it comes to suffering and divine justice. God speaks at last. After all the arguments, God answered Job out of a whirlwind. But instead of giving Job a direct explanation for his suffering, God asked him a series of profound questions. Questions about the creation of the world, the boundaries of the sea, the storehouses of snow, the paths of the stars, and the mysteries of life. "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth?" God asked. "Have you ever commanded the morning? Can you bind the chains of the stars?" Through these questions, God revealed his infinite wisdom, power, and sovereignty. He showed that his ways are far beyond human comprehension. Job realized that he had spoken about things he did not fully understand. Humbled, he responded, "Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. Therefore I repent in dust and ashes." Restoration and renewal. God then turned to Job's friends and rebuked them for speaking incorrectly about him. He instructed them to offer sacrifices and told them that Job would pray for them. Job prayed for his friends, demonstrating forgiveness and humility. After this, God restored Job's fortunes. Not only was everything returned to him, but it was doubled. He received twice as many livestock as before. He was blessed again with 7 sons and 3 daughters. His daughters were said to be the most beautiful in the land, and they received an inheritance alongside their brothers. Job lived a long and full life after his restoration, seeing his children and grandchildren through several generations. He died old and satisfied, having experienced both deep suffering and great blessing. The message of Job. The story of Job is one of the most profound explorations of suffering in human history. It teaches that righteousness does not guarantee a life free from pain. It challenges the idea that suffering is always a direct result of sin. Job's story reveals that faith can endure even the darkest trials. It reminds us that God's wisdom is beyond human understanding, and that trust in him does not depend on circumstances. Above all, the story shows that even in silence, even in suffering, God is still present, and in his time, restoration can come.